Really bad. I'll start again. Welcome to Devil's Advocate. I muted my mic. Really shocking. I'm joined with Sean today. Sean, how are you, old friend? You're muted as well.
Very good. Well, I'm still very good. And how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I think it's been a nice, relaxing 2 weeks, hasn't it? International break. Hoping the lads have had a bit of a break as well. Some of them have gone off on holiday and kind of relaxed. I know there's a couple of things about Rashford, etc. Is he going to start? Isn't he going to start? So I think it'll be quite interesting. But looking forward to the game and 100% hoping for a win. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm hopeful for the win as well. And you're right. I think the break was probably needed for a lot of the players. I know Rashford didn't get involved with the England setup over the couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Probably good for Man United. I don't know what your opinion on that would be. Obviously, being Irish, I wouldn't have a dog in the fight, so I can't say too much on that. I'm glad of his break from with my Irish hat on. I guess looking at Premier League and being a Man United supporter, but I think a lot of players maybe that weren't involved internationally over the last couple of weeks, it's a really probably well deserved, well earned break at this point.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues for me as a football fan, actually, not just as an Englishman, but as a football fan, is there's way too many non-entities in terms of too many qualifying games. And there are times where you can qualify with certain teams and not require your so-called heavy hitters in players. And I think there's a huge knock-on effect in terms of mentality and in terms of fitness. And I think this year particularly, or this season particularly, it's been very, very difficult with the World Cup kind of sandwiched in the middle, players playing up until the World Cup, having no time off during the World Cup. And then, I mean, Manchester United in particular, I think, haven't we played something like 30 plus games since the World Cup? We've been absolutely non-stop, and it just isn't good enough. But just before you come in, we'll bring Pete in. How are we, Pete?
How you doing, guys? You okay?
Yeah. So Pete's our resident Newcastle fan. I'm told. So you're obviously thinking about life at the minute, Pete.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy. Cannot complain at the moment. Being a Newcastle fan, obviously, we would have loved to have won a cup this year, but it's not always possible. But no, look, from we keep saying it as a fan base from where we were a year and a half ago and beyond.
Yeah.
We never ever thought we'd be in a position now with 12 games to go that we're talking about potentially fighting not just for Europe but potentially Champions League. And we saw that a few years down the line, and
Sure.
I think every Newcastle fan is just loving life right now, if I'm honest with you.
Great. Well, just before you come on, me and Sean were talking about the international break, and I was just going through my thoughts on, whether or not there's too many international games, too many tournaments, what's happening with the players. We were talking about the World Cup being sandwiched in. So Sean was just going to give his thoughts on that, and then maybe you could give us your thoughts on the international break and how many games that Manchester United have been playing as opposed to Newcastle, and whether you think that will have an effect, what your form's like at home, and then we'll drill down into the tactical side of it, and then we'll do a lineup prediction. It's going to be difficult for me and Sean because we don't 100% know where we are injuries wise, and then we'll go for a score prediction. So yeah, sorry, Sean. Let's just hear your thoughts on the international break, and we'll go.
Yeah, I suppose. Look, the World Cup in winter was controversial at its inception. I think that's really fair to say, and I'm probably not doing it justice by saying that. And obviously now, the teams that are in several cups, you've City in the Champions League, the FA Cup, and the Premier League. You've ourselves, that got all the way to the Carabao Cup. I don't mean to mention that straight away after you come on, Pete. But nevertheless, look at that. It's a fact, and that's it. I'll try to be gentle. But the fixture congestion has really, it seems like it's hit United harder than any other team, Man United, harder than any other team in the league this year. And that's, for me, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a blessing and a curse. in the sense of it's great to be in all these competitions, and kind of like to mirror what Pete was saying about, we didn't think we'd be where we are at this point this season.
Yeah.
I didn't think Man United would be where we are at this point this season either. When we got to that final just a couple of weeks ago, it was close all the way up to, the game itself, obviously, but even the build-up, everyone was talking about how close it was going to be. And we all know how Magpies like to steal shiny things. And I thought this is going to be, potentially a recipe for disaster for Man United. But look, we got out of that. But that worries me for the game ahead, because I think, a point to prove. It's like, that terrible result Man United got not too long ago, and I'm not going to mention it too much, but the next game after that, I was at it, the Real Betis game, and it was, we have a point to prove now, after that. And I think that Newcastle probably going to have that mentality coming in. I'd love to hear what Pete thinks of that, that thought that, we've a point to prove now. This lot beat us in the cup final just a couple of weeks ago. They have been beaten heavily recently, let's go in and do the job on them, and I think that's going to be the mentality. So Man United have to fight for this result, I think, maybe more than if it was just an average league game on a Tuesday evening in St James's Park,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So Pete, just give us your thoughts on the international break, and then just a snippet of what you're expecting during the game, and then I think we'll drill into it then, and we'll go from there.
Are you happy for me to come back?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So I was, I think going back to the point of his from a Newcastle perspective, going for it on Sunday. I think we will. There's a lot of talk around the fan base about sort of a revenge for the cup final and all the rest of it. I don't quite see it as a revenge type situation, but I feel like we didn't fully show our capabilities in the cup final. We didn't turn up in the way that we expected to. And we didn't come into the cup final with a good run of form. We were going through our worst run of form, in the build-up to the season. I think we've had something like 5 draws and 1 defeat, which is still not that bad, but it just shows how well we've played this season. Whereas we're going in a little bit different now. Yes, we've had the international break, but we're going in with 2 wins back to back. And in particular, the Forest game on the Friday night, I was there and in the away end. And for me, we should have won by more. We played very, very well. And I just feel that this is going to be a really big game for Newcastle, because this is going to tell us about what the next 11 games after this is, what we're going to expect from us. If we do lose the game and we don't put in a performance, we may well sort of drift for the next 11 games. But I think if we put in a really good performance and we come at you a little bit like we did last year at St James's Park. Obviously, we were in our transition under Eddie Howe at that point, and it was 1-1, and I don't know, you guys might disagree. You were slightly fortunate to score. It was a bit of a scrambled goal that Cavani scored, but we played really well in that game. It was just after Christmas. And, it was the resurgence of, or the kind of the rise of Joe Linton, and there was a number of players that really stood out in that game. And I think you're going to see something similar from Newcastle on Sunday, if I'm honest. I think we're going to start sharp. We're going to start hard. The one thing that I have a question mark on, and you've just touched on it, Stu, is the longevity of Man United playing in so many games and playing in so many competitions. You may not agree, but watching Man United, they do tend to tire as the game goes on. Whereas for Newcastle, we're talked about as one of the fittest teams, if not the fittest team in the Premier League, because we run and we press for 90 minutes. We don't do it for a short period of time. We didn't show it in the cup final, but in games recently, Wolves and Forest, it looked almost back to what we were pre-World Cup, when we were going on 6 wins in a row, and we were pressing teams and we were pushing teams and we were continually attacking. I think if we see that Newcastle United, I think it's going to be a game where it could well be tough for Man U. I'm not saying you're going to lose it or that, but I'm saying it's going to be a tough game for you guys.
I think that's a fair response. I think it's a fair assessment. I think Sean was right about his assessment as well. What I would say about the cup final, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of your main strengths, as well as your pressing, is your short game. Your short game is brilliant because you've got Guimaraes who will play it 2, 3, 4 yards. He'll receive it. He'll knock it on again 2, 3, 4 yards. He'll receive it. Your short game is exceptional. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to push up the pitch 20, maybe 25 yards, and then that brings in Joe Linton. Then that brings in Almiron. So you've got Joe Linton with a little bit of skill, but he's a bit more of a robust player. And then you've got the lightweight Almiron, who's very, very quick, very dainty, can drop his shoulder and get round, or he can cross. And then your problem has been, up until this point, has been Callum Wilson's inability to find a net for 12 matches, as opposed to Isak's ability to find the net in 3 matches.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the pitch at the size of Wembley, and we have a master at disruption in Casemiro, that's what did for you at Wembley, really. I'm not really sure whether Guimaraes should have come straight back in. I can't remember if he was suspended or if he was injured. I can't quite remember the alternatives.
That was his first game back after a 3-match ban.
Well,
so
okay,
not had any match practice at all.
And I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but me and Sean discussed this prior to the final, and we felt that Guimaraes would have an impact or he wouldn't have an impact. It'd be one or the other. There wouldn't be a situation where he'd be able to have a mediocre game. He had to be on it or he wasn't going to be. And I think that really helped us because he wasn't. He just couldn't get to grips with the likes of Casemiro in there, utilising the football as it should be utilised. Mm-hmm. So that was my assessment of Newcastle. I think you're right, and I think Sean's right. I think it's a completely different game Sunday. And the fans, there's a lot of comments already saying that we're a little bit nervous, what's going to happen. I actually think if we go and we cross that white line with the mentality of not sit back for 25 minutes, but control the play for 25 minutes. There's a big difference between sitting back and allowing you to come on us and actually controlling the football. And I think if we can control the football, i.e. keep you at arm's length, like a boxer would jab, just keep you at arm's length until we can get on top of the game, until we can play ourselves into the match, I think we'll have a much better chance. If, as you both have said, Newcastle come at us and you punch drunk us straight away, you hit us with a right and a left and an uppercut, we could be in serious trouble because it's all about recovery for us. Everything is about recovery. And if we can't recover after this first 20, 25 minutes because you've been all over us, it could well be a problem for us. Sean, I don't know what your take is on that. And then, Pete, give me your take on that as well. Just, like to have a general discussion about this now.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought the boxing analogy into it because that's sort of something I had in my head as well because, sometimes, left hook, right hook, uppercut, it is a killer blow, but sometimes you get caught on a counter punch. And this season, all season, I think it's fair to say that Man United have been great, fantastic counter punchers. They've caught so many teams on the bounce this year. We saw it in Tyson Fury's win over Deontay Wilder, where he was knocked down in the 12th, I think it was, came back and won the rest of the round. Casual boxing fans would know about that. And the hardcore boxing fans would know about Corrales versus Castillo, round 9, the most famous round of boxing of all time.
Absolutely.
And I think if Newcastle do come at Man United, they have to be very wary that we can't get caught on the counter here either. So there is a balance, I think, that Newcastle need to find how to crack that puzzle. Because if you don't, there could be serious repercussions. And I know that obviously Man United have to be cautious of Newcastle's approach, looking for this retribution, what I'm going to call retribution anyway, at least. And I can see by Pete's wry smile that he probably agrees with me a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be a chess match, I think. And I know that chess is primarily played with black and white colours. So maybe that's a good sign for Newcastle. But I think the chessboard is going to be red this weekend.
Just before you come in, Pete, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
I want to avoid that, Sean. I think you're right. I would like to avoid that, though. I think if I'm in that dressing room and I'm looking at Guimaraes, if he plays, obviously we don't know at the start 11 yet. I'm looking at Almiron. I'm looking at Joe Linton. I'm looking at Byrne at left back, and I'm wondering how can I disrupt these quartet of players. I don't want to put Trippier into that at the minute because I think that if we play Shaw and if we play Rashford, I think that will be okay. If Rashford is fit, I think Trippier can be contained. For me, the key will be getting through Dan Burn. And I don't mean any disrespect to Dan Burn, but he has a tendency to either be on his game or off his game. And but with Dan Burn, you can push him off his game. You can get him off his game quite early. And you can with Almiron as well to an extent. I love the guy. I think he's one of my favourite players, Almiron, because he's got a really cultured left foot. When he was at Atlanta, he was a tremendous footballer, and it was a completely different model. And I thought he might struggle because he's quite slight, and it's all about adjusting to Newcastle life, understanding the Geordie accent and the Geordie way of life, because it is a problem for players up there. It's been proven in the past, as well as Manchester United. But I thought this season in particular, he's come out of this shell and he's walking around with his chest out and he's playing a good standard of football. We need to get at him. And I think you can. And Joe Linton, you could get at him and he'll start crying quite early doors if you hit him hard. So this is why I want to avoid a chess match, Sean. I want to go in there and do something that Manchester United don't do. And that is absolutely start pounding a couple of these players to get us on top. And if we don't, I fear, as you quite rightly say, Sean, I'm sure, Pete, you'll give us your opinion in a minute, it could turn into a chess match. And that then you're opening yourself up to a sucker punch. Both teams, by the way. That's both teams opening themselves up to a sucker punch.
Yeah.
Pete?
Yeah, some really, really great points. I think what you mentioned, Sean, about finding a balance is absolutely right. We're going to have to. Because I almost see watching Man United as you may disagree, but I see them almost as a counter-attacking team. Is that they will kind of bring you into that into that kind of opinion where you feel quite settled and you feel like you're in control and you've got possession, and all of a sudden they win the ball and they're gone. When you've got the likes of Rashford, and when you've got the likes of, Anthony, or some people don't rate him, some people don't, but you look at the pace in the team. Bruno gets forward. You get men running into the box at pace. And Luke Shaw on the wings, for example, Darlow on the other side. You get players running forward, and that's where you get your goals on that counter-attack. And we have to be aware of that. But I do think that the longer we keep the ball, the better it is for us, because we are a team that is very comfortable with the ball. We've got two centre-backs that can keep the ball all day, albeit a rare mistake from Botman for the Nottingham Forest goal. But actually, we can keep the ball very, very well and keep it in tight spaces. It's whether we've got the players to break the lines, and Bruno Guimaraes is certainly that guy. Bruno Guimaraes has been nursing an ankle injury for a couple of months now, even before the cup final.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
It was probably maybe the Wolves game, but certainly the Forest game, where you looked at him and he looked back to his best, like where he was very dynamic and able to get around the pitch and not kind of almost playing at sort of 70%, just staying in the middle, receiving the ball, ticking it over. He's actually getting about at players. If he's on fire, Trippier down that right-hand side, someone I didn't think I'd expect to be talking about in Jacob Murphy. He's come in and played very, very well. I expect him to start. I said it to another Man United fan the other day. He's almost like your old-fashioned winger, like your Keith Gillespie or your Andre Kanchelski. So just get the ball and he'll just run. He'll run down the wing, down his right side, his favoured foot. He'll beat the man and whip it in the box. And we haven't had that for a long time. We've got these inside forwards that like to cut in on their other foot and whip it into the far corner, whip the balls into the box. Yeah. And he's just kept it simple, and it's become effective. And it just gives us another outlet. And I just think the crowd, the occasion, being at St. James's Park is key. I just think all of those things, it just means that if we get a goal early on, like that puts us in the driving seat, because you guys, the longer the game goes on, as you've just mentioned, Stu, before, it's almost like you want to silence the crowd and then work your way into the game. If we don't allow you to do that, and you get the early goal, I think we scored it within 15 minutes when St. Maximin scored last year. If we can do that, I think then it puts more emphasis on you. And then it's about, okay, what have Man United got? What have you got as a team? Can you come out and give us and show us something different? So, look, it's intriguing, really, really intriguing game. For me, it could go either way. It really could.
Look, both of you guys have come up with some really fair points. I want to touch on something quite critical that you said, Pete, and Sean will give me a right grin here, because again, we've had conversations about our good friend Anthony. There are, and you're absolutely right, he's divided, okay, in our fan base. I'm not so much have a downer on him. I quite like the way that he plays. There are certain elements to his game that I can't be doing with, and if I was on the pitch or in the dressing room, I would let him know it. But there are some things that he doesn't do, and one in particular where he'll beat his man and he won't get the cross in. Now, me and Sean have debated this because we both agree we don't have any real aerial power that allows us to whip a ball in and attack the player or attack the near post or the far post. Now, we've got Weghorst, but Weghorst is very, very much a different footballer, and he will give Botman problems in his own way, but not necessarily aerial. So, Sean, you know what I'm going to ask you? If we do, for some unknown reason, try to whip the ball in, what do we do in the 6-yard box? Because, as I say, as we've spoken, we don't have these players to attack the ball, or have we got them and they just don't get into the box because our wingers or our wide players, whatever you want to call them today, aren't delivering?
Well, I suppose, that's a really good question. I think United have gotten a lot of goals this year, from pullbacks, in around the edge of the box and putting it in low across the box. I think Man United have got quite a good few goals that way this year, actually. So I don't think they're going to rely too heavily on playing it in. And it's funny that Weghorst is so tall. He's just all limbs, and he heading isn't his forte. It's really surprising for a guy that size that he's not just a header machine. Like we've seen with tall players before. You used the word different, Stu, and that kind of made me laugh, because if you have a really weird friend and you're trying to tell your other friends about him, you'll say, oh, and that's John, he's a little bit different, and it's nearly like he's, and I think Weghorst is a little bit different, but my God, is he a workhorse? I've seen him and Anthony, quite recently, as I was saying, and the work they do off the ball is unbelievable. And any doubt I ever had for Anthony was gone after seeing him, in Old Trafford live and in person and in 4K HD, even in the snow. It was unbelievable, the work he does off the ball. And I think for a player that's so attack minded, he gets back quite a bit. He helps his defenders out. I think himself and Wan-Bissaka have a really good relationship, actually. Probably more so than Dalot, in my opinion. I think that's why we're seeing that resurgence of Wan-Bissaka as well. I think Anthony has a lot to do with that personally. Anyone that comes in saying, he's an 80 million pound Beyblade or whatever they're saying, I don't think that's doing him justice. I think he's a great player myself, and I agree that, he does have his detractors, but I'm not one of them. Weghorst equally so. I think he does a lot off the ball, and I think he actually drags players to allow our goal scorers to get goals as well. Yeah, that can't be understated. That's nearly an assist, in my eyes. It's not quite giving the ball to get the goal, but it's really, he's an accomplice to the goal. You know what I mean? If he was up in front of a judge, that's what he'd be, an accessory to the goal. So I love those two players. Weghorst, isn't a complete package. I think we all know that. But at the same time, he gives a different dynamic to Man United. And I prefer him in that position than I would Martial, to be perfectly honest. And I like Martial as well, but I do prefer Weghorst there for what he does off the ball, and I think that's where it is with me.
Yeah, don't upset Trev. He's already on you. He's already.
I want to say hello to everyone in the comments, especially my biggest fan, Trev.
We love Trev. We all love Trev.
He sent me a DM on Twitter the other day looking for a signed hat. So Trev is my biggest fan. A signed Wales hat.
Make sure you get him one. Make sure you get him one.
Yeah. I've got to be honest, Sean. You're the first Man United fan that I spoke to that actually, talks about Weghorst in that particular way. They can see the work that he does, but the way you've talked about him so positively, that's probably the most positive I've heard a Man United fan speak about him.
You should tune in more.
The question I've got for you guys actually is that, with that, with what you've said, Sean, would you look to make this move permanent in the summer? He's on loan at the moment, if I'm right in thinking. Would he be a guy that you would make that move permanent, or is it just a case of you appreciate what he's doing because he's on loan to you, but then it gets to next season and you kind of go, you know what, we're going to move on and we're going to get better?
What? I don't. Sorry, Stu. I want to answer that. So I don't think we're going to make that move permanent. And if we do, it'll be in a backup role. Because call a spade a spade. If they do go for him, they probably get him for what we in Ireland would call handy money. A small few pound relatively. So I think if they do get him, it'll be a backup role. But I said it the minute he came in, and I've said it on this podcast before. And the minute he came in, I think they're going to go for Harry Kane. And I think that getting Weghorst in is almost like a Harry Kane, alcohol-free Harry Kane, for the rest of the season to get used to playing ball into a big player that maybe doesn't rely on his pace like Weghorst, and then you add the goals dynamic to that next season. That's my opinion. That's why I think he was brought in.
No, I think you're right. I think Pete, one of the things that the fan base hasn't grasped is that Ten Hag knew what he was getting. I mean, that's key. That's key to when you, not just when you sign a player, because it's key anyway, but he actually knew what he was getting, and he knew where he'd fit into the way that Ten Hag wants to play. And it took most Man United fans, we love them to bits, we do, but they're a lot on the eye test, and they don't actually look at what a player will do for the actual team and how it can transpire, as Sean says. He'll run Botman ragged on Sunday, and Botman knows he's going to run him ragged, and Botman's got to decide how to play somebody like Weghorst, and that's the real key to any opposition. Is how do I play Weghorst? Because as Sean quite eloquently put it, he's not going to run in behind you, so you haven't got to worry. You haven't got to play him off your shoulder. You haven't got to worry. If you're too far away from him, 3 or 4 yards, he's going to take the ball and he's going to move it. So then you've got to decide: do I stay with Weghorst? Do I go with the block? I put my arms out and stop him running, or he'll stand, and you'll be there as a central defender thinking, bollocks, because he's got the ball, he's laid it off. The hole's there for Rashford, or is there for Anthony, or whoever, Bruno, and they're running the scoring. And this is the problem, and this is why fans have got to understand what players can do. And it leads me on to a question that I got for you. If you're Dan Burn, okay, and you're in the changing room on Sunday and you're thinking, I've got Anthony, what the hell am I going to do with Anthony? Because he's not going to go around me. He's going to try and twist me. He's going to try and push me into the box. Or is he going to take it deep and go outside the box and try and get a shot away, which he's done 3 or 4 times this year and scored? He is an absolute bag of tricks and a nightmare for a fullback. So if you're Daniel Byrne, you're putting on your shin pads and you're having your gel and you're having a bit of a chin wag with your mates, and your mates going, fucking Anthony, Jesus, good luck with that, pal. You're like thinking, what are you thinking? Because he could well be, that could be a key battle. It's why I brought him up earlier. I think it could be a kay battle in deciding the game.
What I will say is it was a conversation we had earlier on in the season, when we played you guys at Old Trafford, the 0-0, because Anthony played in that game as well, and I actually thought Dan Burn, although he got beaten by Anthony a couple of times. I thought he actually managed him quite well. But to answer your question, the one thing I'd be saying, if I was Dan Burn, if I was him standing there, I'd be saying, right, all what I need to do is keep him on his right foot, because he's so one-footed. He hasn't got a right foot. He doesn't like to use it. But if you keep him down that right-hand side and you keep him on his right foot, you have got more than half a chance of not necessarily winning the ball off him, but stopping him doing anything meaningful. And what you've then got the option is that he's going to turn back and play the ball back to his right back. And your job's done as a left back, is that you've got your man to give the ball away. So he's not coming at you. What you don't want is Dan Burn and Anthony in a foot race, long distance, ball over the top, him running onto it, because that's where he'll cause you problems. And what you don't want is to allow Anthony to have the time and space to turn in onto his left foot and cut inside, because he's already proven this season, with all the stick that he has been getting from various different sections, he's proven that if you allow him to cut inside, he can put that ball into the far corner. He scored a number of goals that way in the league and cup this season. So he is capable of that. But if I was Dan Burn, I'd be saying keep him on his right foot, keep him down that right-hand side, because if you keep him down that right-hand side, he's not going to cause you the type of problems that he could potentially cause you. So that would be one thing that I'd say. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I'm sorry, Sean. I'll just take this quickly. No, absolutely right. Look, you when you play fullback, you've got to understand the type of winger, the type of inside forward you're playing against. Absolutely right. And if you have a predominantly left-footed player, you try and keep them off your left foot as much as you can. But therein lies the challenge then for the wide player as well. So if the wide player, such as Anthony, who is predominantly left foot and he's not working on his right foot, and if Dan Burn can push him to the byline or he can push him to the throw line, he's won his battle, and he's just got to jockey him, stand there, and just say, "Well, which way are you going to go?" If you get him in a foot race, he's going to destroy Burn. And so for me, I think you're 100% right. But if I'm Anthony, okay, I'm going to be attacking you with my right foot. Strange as that may seem, but I'm going to push you, because I'm then going to make Dan Burn think, what the hell do I do now? Because I'm expecting him. I've watched 7 games of him this season, and he's done everything on his left peg, everything. So he'll go round to the byline on his left peg. He'll turn on his left peg, does everything on his. So if I'm Anthony, I'm doing everything on my right foot, and I'm making you think. And then when I've got it on my right foot, I'm going to try and cut aside you, use my left arm to try and muscle you out of the way, to then put in whatever I can do with my right foot. And that will completely bamboozle Burn, Botman and Pope, all 3 of you, because you're not expecting a right-footed cross from him, and that's what I would do. Don't know about you, Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Dan Burn is a centre back playing as a full back, but he's doing some job there now, to be fair. And Botman is class as well, in my opinion. I really rate the 2 of those guys. But what you're talking about, Anthony, there using his right foot, I can't see it.
He won't. He won't. It's just what I would do.
Yeah. It's in 2.5 weeks. It takes me the whole month of January to write 2023 when I'm writing a date, because I forget that it's a new year. It takes me a whole month to get used to it. He's not going to learn how to use his right foot in a couple of weeks. But you're right, Stu. He should be thrown in 1 or 2 anyway. But he's done it so little, I can't see it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, no, Burn definitely has his hands full down that side, because he's playing out of his preferred position. Although I think you could argue this season that he's nearly dual skilled rather than out of position. He just has 2 positions now. I think the opposite of what Luke Shaw's done. Luke Shaw's went in at centre back as a full back, and Burn is the opposite. He's a centre back going out to full back, and I think both of them have done really well, thrived even in those positions. But Pete, you must say he's after doing a super job. I've got
to be honest. It's natural for the Burn conversation to be there with Anthony, and to be fair, PDK, who's a follower of Loaded Mag, is in the chat. Newcastle fan. He mentioned a really good point, is that, Dan Burn, we went to the Emirates and he was up against Bukayo Saka, who's arguably the best right-sided attacker in the league this season. And literally, apart from the 10 minutes of a blitz of 10 minutes, kept him quiet for the rest of that game, and we ended up getting a point from there. So we as Newcastle fans always have this concern every week, and we go, oh, who's he up against this week? Oh, they've got some pace, it's going to be difficult. But he always tends to prove us wrong, and he always tends to go out there and put a performance in and actually keeps whoever it is that he's up against quiet. And I made the point of saying he was up against Anthony at Old Trafford early in the season, and Anthony didn't really do anything. And he kept him very, very quiet. And when he did beat him, Botman came along and swept up and kept everything nice and tidy. And I've got no reason to suggest that it's not going to be the same again, if I'm honest. And look, we're adamant that we're going to go out and get another left back in the summer. We're going to get a traditional, like, priority left back that knows that position like the back of his hand. And Burn will come in and form part of a squad next season. He won't necessarily play week in, week out. But you cannot argue that Burn is part of a back five that has the best defensive record in the Premier League this season, and 12 clean sheets, and he's played a big part in that. So it can't be discarded that he's going to be the guy that's going to that everything falls flat. I mean, even in the cup final, both the goals came from the right hand side. Ultimately, the free kick
I think you're right, mate.
Goal. So
yeah. I think you're right, mate. I thought it was a key battle, and I do think it will be a key battle, but I didn't mean it as much as I think it'll be an easy day for Anthony, because he won't play. I think he's, and Sean's right, I think he's been absolutely tremendous. And Sean will know this, because I talk about adaptation, don't I, all the time, and players should be able to adapt. I talk about it all the time, Pete, because for me, if you're in a squad of players, 25, just like Dan Burn, and he's seen Sven Botman come in, or he's seen somebody else come in, then he's got to think about, well, if I'm not going to make it centre half, where can I play? Because I still want to play week in and week out. And he's adapted brilliantly. You've got look, hands off, proper pro. He wants to learn how to dance, mind you. But apart from that, yeah, proper pro. I think if I was in the change room and he was dancing like that, I would have chucked my water bottle at him, or maybe me copper, something like that. Guys, we've got a few minutes to go. It's been a great show, actually. Believe it or not, lads, we're on 38 minutes. It's actually flown by. I say this a lot, guys. I really do. And thanks, everyone, for joining in. But you really want proper football chat, guys. People who understand the game. Weekly Armchair's the one. And also go follow Pete on his channel. Pete, I'm sure you'll be welcome back again. I think Mark's asked you if you want to come on Sunday afternoon to the review of the game, so perhaps he'll get in touch with you separately. Sean, as always, absolute pleasure. I want to finish off then, guys, with Sean bringing out our Man United 11. Pete will go for a Newcastle 11, and then score predictions, first goal scorer, and we'll wrap it up. But it's been a fascinating conversation, it really has, guys, so thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, so it's hard to know injury-wise, but I suppose I'm going to talk about the 11, and look, correct me if I'm wrong, if I've missed any injuries over the international break or just before it, you'll have to forgive me.
I'm Sean as well. I haven't really had a chance to look and see where we are. I think give a team that you think he'll pick.
Yeah, so I think De Gea is obviously your goalkeeper. Probably Shaw, Martinez, Varane, I guess. He's what's his story now at the minute, yeah?
Yeah, I think he's fit.
Yeah, and I'd prefer to see Wan-Bissaka in there, but I think he might go with Dalot. I don't know why he keeps doing that, but I guess he's paid to do that, and I'm sitting here talking to you guys, so he probably knows better than I do, to be fair. I'd go McTominay scored a good few goals, over the international break, so he's probably going to play him with Bruno, and I don't know after that who fills that other position. Sabitzer is question. Probably Fred. It's probably going to be McFred, to be fair, with Bruno. And then, depending on Rashford, Weghorst and Anthony, I would say, if not Sancho. I think that's the lineup. But yeah, McTominay up front, Trevor says. I'm not fully convinced on that, but
yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because obviously we are missing Casemiro.
yeah.
I've said before, and I'll say it again. I think when you've got somebody like Casemiro missing, you've got to shore it up better. And Martinez is a better option at CDM for us, and bringing Shaw in at left centre back, or Harry Maguire in at right back and push Varane across to the left. But because we've got Malassi, you see, who can come in and do a great job for us on left back. I think you possibly could well be right, Sean, and it pains me to say, it hurts me to say, we could see the return of McFred, and I don't think we can take that risk at St James's Park. I really don't. We've got to do something. You've got to be radical. Whether he wants to be radical, whether he wants to risk to be radical, I don't know. Sean's heard me talk about this a lot, Pete. You've got to go rogue in football matches all the time. You have to. You've got to do everything you can to disrupt the opposition. And we need Sabitzer. I've heard he's injured. According to Ranić, he's injured. We'll just have to wait and see. But tough one, Sean, for us.
I don't know. Is McFred the same duo it was last year, though? I think it's after it. Like they're after improving a little bit. Fred, especially. I've been really impressed with him this year, and I really didn't like him. And I've been vocal about that. But I see Helly there in the comments. Some interesting words there. Yeah. That's it. What's Newcastle's 11 going to be? That's what we're all dying to hear now.
What we got?
Well, look, the back five is what it is. I mean, Pope didn't go on international duty, but I think he had a problem with his thigh, but he's trained all week, so there's no problems there. So he'll play. Trippier came back unscathed from England. Botman, there was question marks because he had a bout of food poisoning. When he was in the national squad, there was him, Cody Gakpo, and a couple of others. But we brought him back early, and he's trained the last 3 days. So there's people still concerned about whether he's going to play or not. I think he'll start. I don't think there'll be any problems there. So it'll be Trippier, Shaw, Botman, and Byrne as your back four. Pope in goal, your back five. And then the tough part is the midfield. Is because obviously Joe Linton's back now after his 2-game ban, and Joe Linton, he's been, even though we've won the last 2 games, he's a big miss because of his physicality and his ability to get around the pitch, breaks up the ball. He's really important to what we do. But Joe Willock's been outstanding, and there's one or two that are kind of asking the question why he hasn't been given an opportunity with England, because he has been brilliant recently, really, really good. And he looks like he's really developed his game. But look, Bruno is going to start in that midfield 3. So Bruno Guimaraes will be in there. I do think it will be Longstaff and Willock that will make up the other 2 in that midfield. Lots of energy, lots of work rate. And then it's the front 3. So Miguel Almiron's going to be out for a number of weeks, so he's not available.
He's out, is he, Miron?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's done his. I think he injured his thigh before the Forest game, so they said he's going to be out for about 5 or 6 weeks. He's back running already, but I think it might be the ability to hit the ball with power. I think it depends with the thigh injury. It's very technical, but so Miggy won't be playing, but equally Murphy's been fantastic for us playing on that right hand side. So I think Murphy's going to start on the right. On the left, I think Joe Linton's going to start on the left, and a lot of people outside of Newcastle won't really supporting Newcastle won't really understand that left-hand side. So on the midfield 3, Joe Willock will play on the left-hand side of that midfield 3, and then the left-hand side of the front 3, Joe Linton plays there. And what you'll find over the course of the game is they'll interchange. So you'll find Joe Linton will play in the midfield at parts of the game, and Willock will play out left, and vice versa. And they've got a really, really good understanding. And depending on who's got the ball and who's pushing forward, the other one will slot into position. And that's the big reason why we ended up being in the top 4 for a long part of this season, and being in and around that conversation, is because of that left-hand side and how solid it was and how it's been. And then there's no question for me that Alexander Isak, who's been fantastic.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He has to be started up front. I always said that once we got a run of games from Alexander Isak, because he only had 2 games and then he got injured. He was out for nearly 5 months. So once he got a run of games, he would be the guaranteed starter. And now he's had a run of games in the starting lineup. He's come back from Sweden, fully fit, trained today, no problems. He is going to be the starter for Newcastle, and he was outstanding against Nottingham Forest. He was just by far the best player on the pitch, like easily. And yeah, I think, coming against Callum Wilson, you know what you're going to get. Back to goal, big, strong, physical. Alexander Isak is the complete forward. He can do everything. And I think he will pose some questions on Sunday, that's for sure. Which leaves us, for the first time ever, and this is beyond the 11, is that we've got the likes of Alan Saint-Maximin coming off the bench. Anthony Gordon's back fit now, so he's back in the squad. Callum Wilson. So you've got those type of players that we've not had this season in terms of squad players to be able to come off the bench to improve the team and give us a little bit of something different. So this is what kind of gives us a little bit of confidence, is that we're actually, we're getting players back fit now. Players are coming back in. We're getting our squad back together. Obviously, we've lost Miggy, but we've got the likes of St. Maximin and Wilson and Gordon back. So we've improved on that. So, yeah, that's where we're at. And that's where I think that's certainly my 11. And I hope that's the 11 that's out on Sunday.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, our bench worries me. It's not as strong as it could be.
Who was on the bench? Who was on the bench for Man U?
Well, we'll probably have, I know Lindelof's carrying an injury, so it's likely to be Maguire. It's likely to be Malacia. It's likely to be Palestri. It would have been Garnacho potentially, but...
Injured?
Garnacho's injured.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it could well be Sancho.
For us. He's an impact.
Yeah, it could be Sancho.
Difference.
We've got
Ardallo.
We've got quite a weak bench. So, right, guys, I've got to wrap it up in a minute. So, score predictions. The favoured score predictions. Who do we think is going to win, and who's your first goal scorer? I'll start with you, Pete.
I'm going to stick with what we had a preview show yesterday, and I'll stick with my prediction for that one. So I said that Newcastle would win 2-1. And look, the form that he's in at the moment, I've got to put Isak to score. Is to be the first goal scorer. He's in frightening form at the moment. So yeah, I think it's going to be an entertaining game for the neutral. I think there'll be end to end. I think there'll be chances galore. I think both teams are going to go for it because of what it means after this game for the rest of the season. But I do think being at home with the crowd, everything behind us, I think we'll get the win. So I'm going to say 2-1 Isak first goal.
Okay, well, that's a fair result. I would say from a Newcastle perspective. What do you reckon, Sean?
Yeah, I'm going to say, and I need to explain my scoreline as well, because I'm going to say 3-1 United, and I don't think it's going to be a 3-1 game. I think that it's going to be 1-1 for a lot of the game. I think there's a potential that Newcastle will score first. And I think that Man United will sneak the third goal at the end, at the very end, to make it look a little bit better than maybe it actually was. I think it'll be a scrappy performance out of Man United, but I think that the late goals that they've been getting, this has happened 6-7 times this year so far, where they've been, behind and came back, and then at the very end they've scored a goal to make it look good on match of the day, when the whole game is maybe not painting that picture. So to give Newcastle the respect they deserve, I don't think it'll be a 3-1 game, but I think that'll be the scoreline.
What I'll just add to that is that we haven't scored, we haven't conceded 3 goals against any team this season. Any team. And we've been to the Etihad, we've been to Anfield, we've been to the Emirates.
Man United haven't conceded 7 goals since 1922, but they managed to do it this year. So, Jesus, anything's possible.
That's also true. But I'm just saying that Lee Mays just put in the chat, against the best defence in the league to score 3 goals. That's even Liverpool. We had 10 men, couldn't score. They only scored 2. So yeah, that's a big call, Sean. That's a big call to say you're going to score 3 goals. Interesting, very interesting.
So actually, I was going to say 3-2, as it happens. And,
wow.
Yeah, and again, like Sean, I was going to suggest we steal it at the death. And that again, I appreciate what you're saying about Newcastle having conceded 3 goals. And I get that, and I take that completely on board. I think it's going to be a very, very, very tight game of football, but a very technical game of football and an excellent game of football. And I've just got a feeling, with our ability to snatch stuff at the death, I just think we could do it. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't end up as a 2-2 draw. But I just feel that we're going to scrape it 3-2. But it'll be a tough 3-2. It'll be a hard 3-2. And it could well go. And I'm with Sean, by the way, Pete. I think you'll score first. I think we'll go 1-0 behind. I think we might draw level. Then we go 2-1 behind. I do think it'll be a topsy-turvy game of football. And I think you will have the upper hand for the bulk of it. I don't know. There's just something that suggests we might just sneak it 3-2. I'm not a 3-2 type of guy, really. Love to play in games like that because they're brilliant to play in, but to watch as a fan, it's not great. But that would be me. And first goal for me, tough one. I'm going to go for a header. I think we'll get a header off a corner, Varane. That's what I think. So be interesting. But guys, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. First time meeting you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to meet you. And every time we play Newcastle, we should have you on board, mate, or as a pundit on a normal football chat, mate, because you've been absolutely brilliant. Sean, pleasure as always, mate. Love working with you. You kind of get what you get with Sean, which is absolutely brilliant. Everybody for watching, thank you ever so much. I hope you've enjoyed the chat. I hope you've enjoyed the insight into, how these games can unfold and the kind of battles that can win you or lose you a game of football. So, guys, we can all see your socials. Please interact and follow the guys, Sean and Pete. And any Newcastle fans want to follow us to abuse us, feel free. To be
fair, the loaded people that are in the chat tonight, they are very, very respectful. We're really lucky as a channel because we've got a really respectful fan base. And when we have people on our channel, for example, I think we've had Keen on a number of times, and they're always super respectful. And yeah, we're lucky to have that. So yeah, just really quickly, anyone wants to subscribe to Loaded Mag NFC, you can see it on my little tag there. And we're on the way to 6K, just building nicely and slowly, gradually building. But we'll have a preview show like you guys will. So that'll be Sunday evening, I think. So come and sub and check it out.
Watching him. Thank you, guys. Once again, enjoy the game, everybody. Stay safe over the weekend. Take care.